Yo guys, what's up? Thanks for tuning in again and welcome to a new video of us. Today we're going to talk about shoulder mobility, the myth behind shoulder mobility, because I see people seem to not quite understand what exercise they should use and when they should use it. And a much bigger problem, they don't quite seem to understand what really works and what doesn't. Today we're going to talk about exactly this, and I'll also give you 3 tips on the way to really give you that better overhead position, whether it's for your overhead squat or your shoulder press, or in general any type of like overhead movements. That's the video for you. So let's go. So first of all, I think we have to clarify what mobility training really is and what mobilization and warm-up drills really are, because a lot of confusion is out there what really changes your mobility long term and what's basically pointless, or at least pointless for long-term tissue adaptations. Not necessarily pointless in terms of like warming up and mobilizing and moving that joint. Okay, so for example, very common banded stretches where I grab the band, let my shoulders sink in to open up here, or even like stick rotations, for example, where I just take a stick, I'm going to rotate back and forth, or even low-level shoulder cars where I move my joint through its full range of motion, but without any internal tension, without any effort or intensity. This is great to just move the joint, get a nice little short stretch in, and warm up prior to your lifts, for example. But this doesn't change your shoulder mobility long term. So if you're now already confused, okay, damn, I did almost everything wrong because I just used these drills and thought they helped me with long-term mobility results. No, of course, you might feel some opening, some relief before you jump into exercise, but you don't get any like long-term gains from it, okay? But don't worry, I got you covered here, okay? So let's jump into the exercises and into how you can actually improve that shoulder flexion and overhead position. So a quick reminder before we go into the exercise itself is the shoulder overhead position. So raising your arm beside your head is coming from your scapula and from the shoulder joint itself, okay? So don't always like focus on the joint itself. There's also another joint, obviously a scapula, involved. That's why this is called the scapular humoral rhythm. If we say this is 180 degrees, so raising my arm straight beside my head, so in a vertical, completely perfectly vertical line, 120 degrees of that comes from my shoulder joint itself, and 60 degrees of that comes from the scapula protracting and rotating. So even though I show you specific shoulder mobility drills, always think about also training your scapula as well. A follow-up video on that, how to train the scapula properly, again with long-term results, will come as well. But now we're going to focus on the shoulder stuff. Okay, let's go. So let's jump straight into exercise number 1, and this is going to be a passive stretch, a longer passive stretch for your shoulder, paired with 2 isometric contractions. Most of you know this one, the pails and rails, the progressive angular isometric loading and the regressive angular isometric loading, okay? So the longer duration stretch is 2 minutes and longer. Depending on how stiff, how restricted you are, I would recommend you to hold the stretch longer than 2 minutes. If you already know your passive flexibility, the flexibility of your shoulder is pretty good, you don't even have to hold it for 2 minutes, okay? Just hold it for a minute, do the pails and rails for 15 seconds both, and then focus much more on the active components if you're like already super flexible in your shoulders, but you're lacking the strength and stability for it, okay? But we're gonna go in that child's pose position, and we're gonna aim for our forehead on the floor. I'm going to use a stick because then we can work, or I can work on both shoulders simultaneously. I'm going to have a shoulder width apart grip, and I'm going to focus on not compensating through my wrist. I'm going to hold my wrist in one line with my forearm, so I'm not extending my wrist, okay? I want to find a steep stretch, but where I still have my forehead on the floor. Okay, so from this setup here, I'm gonna go in that child's pose. I'm gonna get my glutes on my heels as far down as possible, and I'm gonna sink down into that deep stretch. Okay. I already know that this position is very close to my deepest stretch, so I really like this position. I would hold this position for 2 minutes. After the 2 minutes, I would apply the pales and rails, the isometric contraction. So in that position, let's assume my forehead is now on the floor. I would then push with the stick down into the blocks, but for 20% first, 40%, 60%, so slowly ramping that contraction up until I found my safest maximum effort. This can be different for everyone out there. So, for example, if you feel pain discomfort at around like 60%, try to stay at 50 or 40% so you're not pushing deeper and more into that pain. That's super important. After the 15 seconds of consistently holding that isometric, pushing down, we're trying to think about a liftoff. This is our deepest stretch, our passive range of motion. We are not able to lift off. We're just trying to think about it and fighting for that liftoff that's not going to happen as hard as possible. Contracting our delts, all of our upper back as hard as possible. Okay, so I'm going to show you here what I mean by that by pushing down and up. So I'm going to push down now, have my forehead still on the floor. I'm going to do that for 15 seconds. And now I'm trying to think of lifting the stick away from the floor and from the blocks. And relax. Okay? This is a great way to first gain more passive range of motion, more shoulder flexibility, and then also strengthen your end ranges. So this is a great one to start everything off. If we get the camera closer over my overhead position, because essentially this is the overhead position, right? If we're gonna think about an overhead squat, I would have the stick right overhead, and this is almost the same position. The only exception is, of course, I'm in a squat and I have a wider grip position. But if we move the camera in a different position, you will see as I'm gonna lift the stick, or as I'm gonna try to lift that stick away from the blocks, my shoulder moves in internal rotation, and that's what we going to train right now. So as you can see, internal rotation is very important when we're in this overhead position. So to get more internal rotation, to get more shoulder mobility in that overhead position, we're going to focus on opening up that internal rotation in that sleeper stretch sideline position. And we will alter the position of your elbow more towards the shoulder flexion, so we target that capsule more specifically. So we're gonna go in that side lying position. And from here, I'm gonna take that yoga block, put the yoga block in front, so I have my elbow like in that shoulder flex position already. Okay, usually I would have my elbow like on the same height as my shoulder. Now I'm gonna position that elbow a little bit higher. What's very important is that you keep the backside of your shoulder really pinned down on the floor. That's super important. I'm gonna rest my head here on the block, and I can really slowly push my wrist down towards the floor until I feel my deepest capsular stretch here. Okay, I'm gonna hold this position again for the 2 minutes, for that duration, and really make sure that the backside of your shoulder is always on the floor. In theory, I could get my full hand on the floor, but I already can feel that the backside of my shoulder is not sticking or glued to the floor. Okay, so that would be like a big compensation. Okay, so try to really think about driving that posterior shoulder down on the floor as you're in a stretch. Then we're gonna find two isometric contractions again, the pales and the rails. For the pales, in our deepest position, I'm going to slowly push my hand up into my supporting hand. Again, ramping up slowly until I find my 100% maximum effort of today. And I'm going to do that for 15 seconds. After that, I'm going to switch my hand, place my hand below and I'm thinking about driving that fist down into my supporting hand, you shouldn't be able to move or create that much force, but try as hard as you can, fighting for a more active internal rotation. After the 15 seconds, you can slowly come out and then do the same thing on the other side, on the other shoulder, okay? So this is super important. The last drill I'm going to show you is again with a stick and is training the active usable range of motion. So we're going to grab the stick and get into that exercise. So guys, again, just a block or 2 blocks are needed and a stick. You can also use your broomstick. You can do this easily at home as well. And obviously with the 2 blocks I used in the beginning, I wasn't able to lift off. So I'm regressing this position by flipping the second block here. So this is my position where I already know I can lift off from. This can be very, very different to your setup. You could be maybe in the same stretch setup that I am or that I was, but you cannot even lift off from 1 block. You might have to lift off from the floor because a big or massive gap between the active usable range of motion and your passive range of motion. Okay, the bigger the gap, obviously the worse it is, because all this range of motion that you cannot access, you cannot move in, is basically useless and not safe for the central nervous system or for the joint. That's why the closer the gap, even though you're maybe restricted and you're stretched here, but you just are able to lift off from here, the closer that gap between active and passive range of motion, usually the better it is in terms of like injury prevention and safety for the shoulder. Okay, this is just a side note. So let's get into that child's pose position, actually work on active liftoffs. I recommend here starting with 2 sets of 6 repetitions, for example, and a 2 to 3 second hold for every single rep. And then you can add an additional set, a third set, after a couple of weeks, for example, and increase the hold time. Additionally, what I recommend, or what I'm using for my athletes, especially CrossFit and weightlifting athletes, is using this exercise but with additional mini plates, like in the with the bamboo stick, to really make sure that shoulder is bulletproof and strong. Okay, let's get into that position. Gonna get my forehead down on the floor, wrists are not extending or compensating, getting my child's pose position, head on the floor, and I'm gonna really try to fight for that lift off, and I'm gonna hold it for 3 seconds just to show you. So this was a very tiny liftoff, which is perfect and what I need. So maybe only a finger or a credit card can slide or fit in between the stick and the block. Okay, so these were my 3 tips. Hope this video helped you. If you're still struggling and if you're still not feeling safe with the exercise itself or with the programming, don't worry about it. I am there for you. I can help you. You can schedule a free consultation. You can find the link down in the description below. And we can also work on an online FRA, a functional range assessment, an online assessment where I assess not only your shoulder, but also your scapula, or also the rest of your body if that's what you need, if that's what you want. And then we can work one-to-one close with an individualized program based on the outcomes of that assessment, if you want that, of course. Try these 3 exercises out. You can do that at home, in the gym. Let me know in the comment section below how it went for you, and of course what kind of videos you want to see next. Okay, see you guys next time. Enjoy your day.